and you will also learn something and be inspired. Today, we have dix Moore-Broussard with us. She's an art therapist and the director of the Neutral Ground Collective, and we are going to be hearing from her in just a little bit after we do a bit of housekeeping. This program is brought to you all by this management team. Myself, I am the executive director of the Wetlands Discovery Center. We also have Ms. Maida Owens with us, who is the Folklife Program Director for the Louisiana Division of the Arts. Dr. Rachel Doherty, among being an excellent marksman, she is also the she is a professor over at the Center for Louisiana Studies at the University of Louisiana in Lafayette. And of course, wait, let me move this over a bit. And of course, we have Dr. Gary LaFleur, who is the R.E. Miller Endowed Professor of Honor Studies, Professor of Biology over at Nicholls State University. So we like to share this with our group every month. Sort of our disclaimer that we don't have all the answers to these challenges, nor support any particular adaptation or management strategy. We are here to have some of those tough discussions and hopefully come up with potential solutions together. We would like to thank our partners who helped to produce this program. That's the Louisiana Folklife Program, the South Louisiana Wetlands Discovery Center, Louisiana Folklore Society, the Center for Bayou Studies over at Nicholls State University, and the Center for Louisiana Studies at the University of Louisiana Lafayette. And of course, we couldn't do any of this work without our funders, so a special thanks goes out to the National Endowment for the Arts, the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program, Restore the Mississippi River Delta, the M.J. Sindler Family Fund for Culture and Media, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development through the Division of the Arts, and the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. We're always looking to expand these programs, so if any of you have any ideas or connections to funders that you would like to share with us or send them our way, we would greatly appreciate that. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the extension of the work that we do at the end of our discussion. And so now I'd like to pass this on to Ms. Maida Owens, who will discuss a little bit about the Passing It On workshops through the Louisiana Folklife Program.
Yeah, we have more Passing It On workshops that are going to be happening in the spring. So please let me know if you know a tradition bearer that should be, pass on their tradition, or organizations that may not already get arts grants. There are two different ways that we we use these funds from the Division of the Arts. For the spotlight, I'd like to share about the Broussard sisters. This is absolutely one of the most endangered traditions in the state. This used to be much more widespread. Jure is an African call and response tradition, no instruments. And the Broussard sisters in the Opelousas area are sisters and sisters-in-laws that keep doing this, and we funded them last June. And in the chat, I posted about them and a link to where you can learn more about this tradition and the Broussard sisters. But this is the type of thing, well, there are many, many types of traditions that we want to support. And this is, but this is one of the most endangered.
Thank you, Maida. So the agenda for today, we're going to hear from Ms. dix Moore-Broussard. We'll have a question and answer session with her after her presentation. We'll ask her what her hope for the coast is, and then we'll have a few updates on the working groups, any announcements from the group, and then we'll have our informal discussion, usually from about 1 to 1:30. Before we jump in with the presentation from Dix, I'd like to ask Gary for two things, if you would. One, if you could do a quick explanation about the lovely prayer flags that are behind you in your screen and how those came about. And then two, because today we're going to be talking about trauma and stress If you don't mind sharing the story, and you did this so eloquently and inspirationally. I heard the story that you talked about the kakaho minnow and how it survives in the environment it does. And I think that's going to be a beautiful segue into what Dix is going to share with us today. Gary?
Sure. Well, these prayer flags came from the Rougarou Fest, and Dix and Mark were there, and they were hosting a booth where you could come and you could make your own prayer flag, and then they tied it onto this string. And so she hung them all during the Rougarou Fest, but I inherited them, and I've been traveling around with them around the coast. I hung them for Thibodeauville, so I'm kind of carrying on these coastal prayers and wetland prayers that Dix got us started on.
Love that.
As
Thank you.
Jonathan said, I'm call myself a fish biologist sometimes. So I care about the fishes in the Louisiana marshes. And one of the ones that I study the most is Fundulus grandis. That's the Gulf killifish. But around here, people call that the kakaho minnow or the larche. And it kind of goes unnoticed in a way. If you look at it, it's a pretty plain fish. It's too small to eat by humans, but people use it as bait. And what makes it a good bait fish is what also makes it a good fish for science. And so I study how these fish make eggs. And it means that I get out into the marsh and I trap these fish a lot. And one thing that you see about this type of fish, a kakaho minnow, is that it's in the Louisiana marsh where you realize it's kind of hard to be a fish in this part of the Louisiana marsh. Now, one thing about the Louisiana marsh is it's true that it's teeming with life, right? There's a lot of things that you'll see on a day in the marsh, but actually, if you count the number of species, there's only a few species that can tolerate the Louisiana marsh. And that's because the salinity changes so much. So if the tide is coming in, you get high salt in the marsh. If it's a real rainy day and the tide is going out, it can go from 20 parts per thousand, which is very salty, to like 5 parts per thousand, which is very fresh. And most fish cannot handle that. Like a freshwater fish like a sac-a-lait cannot handle that. A red snapper that you find offshore, it can't handle that. So it ends up when you're in the Louisiana marsh, even though it looks like there's a lot of plants and animals, really there's just a few different species that are tough enough to handle that. And one of them is the kakaho. The kakaho, it can be in a puddle where there's hardly any water. That water can freeze. In Louisiana, we get a freeze every now and then. He can take it when it's salty, take it when it's fresh. They're tough little fish. And it kind of reminds me of the people that I see that live in Cocoa Tree. So, what has made that fish, the kakaho minnow, so tough is natural selection. It takes millions of years for that. But what you see in the coastal people from Pointe-aux-Chenes to Cocodrie to Ile de Jean-Charles, you kind of see a molding that has occurred so that the people that can't quite tolerate the stress of the coast, well, they move away. And the people that are there, like the 80-year-olds that are still on the coast, they've kind of been selected for. They know how to get through the stress of the coast. And I'm not just talking about the hurricanes that happen every 5 years. It's more like the day in and day out of how to live on the coast. People like Edison Dardar, who just recently passed away on Ile de Jean-Charles, and my friend Cecil Laperouse, they know how to survive on the coast, kind of like a kakaho. You could call it traditional ecological knowledge. Instead of natural selection, it's kind of like that is what molds people so that they can survive the coast. So I think most people on the call here, we all know people that can survive on the coast, like Wayne Simoneau. I know he's on the call. He's one of those people that knows how to survive like a kakaho minnow. All right, that's it from
Thank,
me.
thank you so much for that, Gary. I really appreciate that. I love that explanation. It always inspires me to be like, yeah, we got this. We can do this. So, and it's a wonderful segue into today's presentation by Ms. dix Moore-Broussard, again, an art therapist and the director of the Neutral Ground Collective, and dear friend. Dix, it's so nice for you to be here with us today. And so I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. So finding balance in a shifting landscape. So the key word here is balance. So balance inherently requires movement. A lot of people think it's being static, but it's actually the opposite. It's a dynamic process that involves constant micro adjustments that taps into different parts of our nervous system. And so today I'm going to kind of be doing like a little glimpse of some of our workshops that we provide at Neutral Ground Collective. Essentially what we do is we address collective trauma from a somatic-based lens, reconnecting the mind to the body, and using neuroscience terms and terminology to kind of like make the connection so people can like actually understand what's happening when they experience stress or different types of trauma. And I'm going to define those terms, and then we're going to have little experientials in between. So before we get started, if you'd like, kind of do a check-in, just notice where you're sitting. Notice the level of energy that brought you here today. Is it high? Is it low? Notice any emotions that may be coming up. And let this serve as your baseline throughout this presentation and also throughout the day. And notice little shifts in your nervous system as you move through the day. So we're going to jump to some science here. So right here, this is a breakdown. This is the parasympathetic, sympathetic. So the parasympathetic, this is what keeps us breathing, alive, doing all the things, rest and digestion. And then on the other side is sympathetic, which is movement. This makes our bodies go into movement, and different parts of our bodies, the lungs and the heart and the digestive system, they all participate in the mobility piece. So really quick, I thought to put this up because the polyvagal theory kind of broke this into three components. So parasympathetic and sympathetic became ventral and dorsal. This is the parasympathetic. So essentially this is movement, ventral, and dorsal is in mobility. And then sympathetic is mobility, constant mobility. We need this to cross the street, for an example. So the role of the autonomic nervous system is protection. It is scanning for safety and danger. And Dr. Stephen Porges, who's a neuroscientist, actually did some more research on what was happening within our nervous system in regards to trauma and chronic stress. And because the old traditional ways of how they were actually dealing with trauma, it came from a lot of the Vietnam vets, drug-based therapies wasn't working. And so with research, he discovered that the role of the autonomic nervous system is actually playing a huge role on how stress is gets stuck, and even trauma gets stuck. So kind of right now, I would like invite you to bring awareness to your space. And if you'd like, you can look at the photo. And when we are out in nature, we automatically go to ventral, which is social connection. And we can actually do this when we're looking at a photograph as well. And so if you would like, you can just kind of notice the clouds, the colors, the different hues of gold and blue. And just bring awareness to the photo, and then maybe bring awareness to your space. And when you're ready, we're going to continue. So what is stress? A lot of people don't understand the terminology of stress. And when we say that a lot, I'm stressed out. So the term stress actually comes from the engineering field. And it's to describe the actual physical strain put on a structure. And then Hans Saley, create an endocrinologist. He reconceptualized the physiology of stress on the human body. And so he came up with this adaptation. So if you look right here, I was saying ventral, which is when we're not necessarily calm, but ventral is when the body, everything is regulating, everything is breathing, we're, homeostasis. And I've always used the crossing the street kind of as our kind of our go-to. So here we are crossing the street, everything is chill, we look both ways, and then all of a sudden, boom, a car comes out of nowhere. So our response system goes up, and the sympathetic, we jump back or move to the side. So what happens is sometimes when people have a lot of ongoing stress happening, they will move from
And then, of course, we had a nice rally here, able to get into it right now. But the key
and
new.
I love it. And then sometimes people struggle with coming off of, like, you can't shake it off, put it that way. Or even if you're at work, you have deadlines, or, the stress of, like, if you're in school and deadlines and you're not making it, sometimes people will go, and then they crash. And that's what we call the burnout. And when that happens, that leads to bad health. That leads to, what can we say? The dysregulated part of sympathetic, the survival state of sympathetic becomes anxiety. Instead of movement, then we go to fight or flight. And then with the dorsal, instead of like rest and digest, it's moving to freeze and disconnect. So that's the area right here that we want to try to avoid. So there's two types of stress. Now, this is debatable here because for me, stress is neither good nor bad. Stress is neutral. Okay, we need stress. In terms of biology, mammals utilize stress for survival and reproduction. And as Gary was pointing out to those things, I can't pronounce that word, whatever he was saying, the little fish. So, whatever's happening in their environment, they're thriving in it. And so some people, procrastination is actually a form of anxiety, by the way, and some people thrive in it, but some people don't. So eustress promotes optimal functioning, such as mild anxiety before a test, and can actually, or an interview, it can actually elevate your performance. Now, that's debatable for some people, especially if you're neurodivergent. If you're experiencing mild anxiety before a test, you literally sometimes blank out. So, which I think can become distressful. And then distress is harmful because it creates a negative impact on your health, and then can lead to chronic stress, which may lead to exhaustion, burnout, physical illness, and it compromises your immune system. And this one, allostatic load. This we do have to be careful. And even though we are very resourceful in South Louisiana, we do need to be mindful of how much we're holding. Now, allostatic load refers to cumulative biological wear and tear, long-term exposure to chronic stress. There's another term called weathering. That's a really good book that I am reading right now. It's just talking about the wear and tear of chronic stress. And allostasis, which is the good part of allostatic, is it's stability through change. So it refers to achieving physiologically stability by continually adjusting the internal body system. So everything is operating and we're just we're moving and we're meeting the energy of the day. So you're out running errands, you're, you know, cooking dinner, you're moving, and everything is like copacetic. So, however, when we experience chronic or repeated stressors over and over, the allostatic system starts to produce excess amounts of hormones such as cortisol, and this results in increase in allostatic load. And what happens is that you can develop tachycardia. It also affects your sugar intake, and then you can become insulin resistant as well. I've noticed a lot of young people that I've been working with in my private practice. I think that a lot of the pandemic was a collective trauma that a lot of people haven't really identified and moved through. And we're doing a lot of work I'm doing a lot of work in my private practice with how to release the stress in your body, because our bodies hold the stress. Our connective tissues, which I think I'm going to go on into another slide, it actually holds the stress in our body. So even like when we are like leaning over in we're on these computers right now, just kind of be mindful of like where your spine is and maybe elongate it a little bit. And right here, I would like to invite you just to notice your breath. Just your normal breath. And if you'd like an invitation to look at this picture, I'm not sure what swamp, but I just pictured, I copied a whole bunch of swamp pictures. And the clouds, notice the colors. Notice the reflection. Just notice your breath. So next slide, defining trauma. Now this is another one. Sometimes this word gets overused when we're experiencing repeated stressors. It will cause a trauma in your system, so to speak, but really, truly, trauma is a stressful occurrence that is outside the range of usual human experience, markedly distressing, serious threat to one's life, destruction of a home or community, community violence, domestic violence. However, there are like little gray areas. There's accidents and illnesses. There's racialized trauma that never gets addressed in the United States. And then, of course, medical procedures. And so our bodies are holding these chronic stressors and trauma unbeknownst to us. So, and we all experience some sort of trauma on some level. And it's important to know that trauma is ancestral, it's individual, and it's collective. We now know that trauma can be inherited through your DNA. We now know that there is a thing called historical trauma, and that was termed by a Lakota woman that was a social worker in the 90s, and talking about the ongoing generational historical trauma that indigenous people have gone through. And what it looks like is diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, and not even including like your environment. And this is what will happen when we're not paying attention to what's happening in our body. Where's my little thingy? Oh, there it is. Okay, so sometimes what happens is if we've gone through repeated stressors, I don't want to bring anybody to like a bad moment, but if you would like think of something that wasn't too frightening, but kind of like disappointing, like you were kind of hoping for another outcome. God, I can think of a million things right now, but anyway, there's this little tool that you can use. We call widen the lens and adjust the focus. So imagine you have a camera, and sometimes it's hard to see beyond the sense of hopelessness that accompanies being pulled into dorsal. Now remember, dorsal is rest and digest, but in the survival state, it's disconnect, it's isolation, it's burnout. So you want to actually, your nervous system is saying, you need to check out, go in with yourself. Notice how sometimes like I'm holding my arms this way. This is a protective mode. And this is a good tool that a lot of somatic therapists use just to kind of like go back into your senses. Notice my hands on my shoulders. So little invitation to do this prompt if you'd like. So pretend you have a camera. Now the camera is easy to zoom in and out and you decide how much to include in the frame. Okay. So even though when we go into dorsal and we feel hopelessness and we don't feel like we can control it, you know, like we don't see a way out. If you could, to try to remember this exercise, that you can pull yourself, you can control the narrative, you can control what you were seeing in here, because when we're really up close to it, that's all we're seeing. So sometimes you got to back away and look at it from a different lens. So instead of kind of doing a movement, an experience memory, I don't really want to do that for anyone right now. Let's pretend we're doing this for this this photo. So I want you to zoom in to the furthest tree that you see. And you can even go like this if you want. And just notice that tree in the distance. Notice the branches. And then we zoom out and then we can see the other trees that are right near us. And you just notice the branches, notice the colors, the different hues of green, different tans, browns, how the water's been kind of treating how the roots are. You just notice and widening the lens and not seeing that one particular tree in the distance, or just taking it all in. So we now know that we can transform trauma and stress through neuroscience. Chronic stress and trauma actually does change the brain structure. And Vander Kolk, who I'm quoting on that, is another neuroscientist, neuropsychiatrist actually, that he did some more studies after Dr. Porges' release of the polyvagal theory. This is the polyvagal theory kind of was like the match that just exploded, and all of these trauma modalities came out of the polyvagal theory, understanding how we can reconnect the mind to the body through the autonomic nervous system. And although we can't control it, we do know that we can learn how to map it and friend it so that stress doesn't have to stay in our body. There's different types of movement that we can do that releases it. And we can then, when we start to release it, and you'll know it when you do, like when some of the workshops, some people that do come, and it's always very safe and I make sure everybody is okay, but trauma does, like things that you didn't know does get released. And so with that, then we can start to change that pattern, that thing that perhaps that would either trigger us, to use that word lightly, or that stressor that is no longer really stressing you out anymore. And then there's another, I love this term, is neuroplasticity. This is the brain's ability to reorganize itself through different types of activities. We can change our old response patterns. So by creating art, learning a new language, cardio, sleep, gardening, even humming, dance. So although in South Louisiana, we have our whatever culture, ethnicity that you are from, we are all interconnected by historical trauma and racialized trauma from, you know, when they refused, they didn't let us speak our language. You know, we were punished for speaking French, from slavery, from, you know, historical trauma within indigenous communities. It's all in our DNA, but we somehow have managed, and I can't speak for everyone, I'm speaking for community. We thrive anyway because we actually do neuroplasticity activities through our coming together, through cooking and sharing food, through communing with each other. Those are actually healing, co-regulation things that we're doing. And us making sure that our young people are learning Cajun again, learning Louisiana Creole again. That actually will help our generational trauma. And because even though chronic stress can change the brain structure, the brain is made to reorganize itself, okay? So we're not at a loss. So right here, with that information, I kind of want to do, it's called exterioceptive meditation. So if you would, and if you don't want to, you don't have to, but if you would, you can bring your hands together and I want you to stare at your fingertips. And we're just going to sit here staring at our fingertips for a few breaths. And then on the next breath, you could look to the picture and stare to the sun. And notice the ripples on the water. And now if you would move your eyes, keeping your head straight towards the sun, but move your eyes to the left. And notice the silhouette of the trees. Imagine if you were drawing this, what colors would you pick? Or painting it. And then looked back towards the sun. And then move to the right. Notice the shadows. And then go back to the sun. And then to your fingertips. And on the next breath, you can bring your arms down. So what happens with the eye movement? I'm activating the autonomic nervous system, which I didn't really talk about the vagus nerve. I was trying to minimize all the terminology, but the vagus nerve is connected to our eyes, and which is connected to our heart. So when we do these eye movement exercises, just pausing, and then another one for a few breaths, it actually resets your vagus nerve. So if you're feeling funky, if you're feeling stuck and you can't shake it off, those are some exercises that you do that resets the vagus nerve. When you yawn or when you sigh, that's your autonomic nervous system resetting itself. I have a funny story. He gave me permission to always share the story. I had to write a note for one of my clients, because this is very connected to neurodivergent, by the way. I see a lot of 30-something males that have ADHD. Anyway, I had to write a note for his wife because his sign was getting on his nerves, or her nerves. But it was really important because he had to learn how to readjust his nerve. He was learning how to map his nervous system. And so I had to write a note, let your husband sigh out loud. So this is a term that we don't really hear a lot of. This particular study by Calhoun and Tedeschi was from University of North Carolina. In the 90s, they focused on individual. And it's the phenomenon of people experiencing positive effects in their personal life or outlook after a tragedy or a crisis. And this is kind of sticky here because we want to be careful using this term for individuals, because I'm going to tell you why I started Nutrigon at the end, but it's a tall order to ask a single person to be like, you can get post-traumatic growth all on your own. However, there's more research coming out, and this is the tenet that basically what Nutriground, what our mission is talking about collective trauma and healing from collective trauma. So collective trauma is a series of events that cause lasting harm to a group of people, affecting physical, mental, social, emotional, and even your spiritual being. it disrupts a sense of safety. So we know that because those are hurricanes, those are oil spills, that's the petrochemical companies poisoning our air. You know, it's not just disasters like extreme weather events. And of course, there's war, mass shootings. A lot of people in the United States do not realize how much collective trauma we endure on a daily basis. And so also people can experience the collective trauma secondhand through first responders, healthcare workers, mental health educators, even watching the news. You know, I tell people don't watch the mainstream media anymore. It's just one attack after another after another. And that's why so many people in the United States live in so much fear. It's being fed to us. So there is a thing as such as post-traumatic growth. In relation to collective trauma, increased awareness of post-traumatic growth can improve how we communicate publicly about disaster recovery and how communities can recover and thrive again. Rather than only promoting resilience, and I put that in quotations because that word is overused. And interesting enough, there's no indigenous word, global indigenous word for resilience. I like to say thrive. Because we hear the word resilience. Well, in my opinion, we've heard the word resilience being thrown at us in South Louisiana. And it basically means you got this. Y'all don't need us and you can handle it. And so, you know, and we do, we need to be, we need that trauma to be acknowledged and that the community has endured it. And then we can make steps and how to integrate post-traumatic growth. So it's essential to connect with community leaders, cultural bearers, tribal leaders, and then pair with community programs in place, which can uplift post-traumatic growth and community-led projects, such as the
right
prayer
here.
flag. The prayer flag came out of my experience after Katrina. I'm not sure if y'all are, well, y'all know this. New Orleans, well, the one way that they knew and that they could actually recolonize New Orleans is they took our public schools. They fired, I was one of the 7,000 public school teachers that they fired after Katrina. I was a teaching artist in the school system. And they privatized all of our schools. Then they also did a zip code thing. So certain zip codes didn't come back. So we weren't able to really empower ourselves. And that's essentially how my planting the seeds of Nutriground came about. Because even though I was doing EMDR therapy myself to kind of process all the stuff that we were dealing with after the storm, you know, when I came back in October when they said we couldn't come back, yeah, I know I broke the rules, and I was bartending and just trying to figure out how we're going to do this together. But even though 5 years later, when I was doing my own like trauma healing, I would go back into the school I was working at, and it was intense, and I didn't have all this knowledge, but now I know I was using the arts in a therapeutic way, and to empower the kids, and let them have a voice. And that's sort of where, that's the reason why I did the prayer flags. I started that 5 years after Katrina. And let the kids, like, you know, write out, let community members, like, what do you want to see? What, you know, what is your voice? And when you give somebody that voice and you're listening, it totally empowers not just that individual, but all of a sudden you have this cohesion. So community healing through co-regulation. So understanding that our nervous systems, we're wired to connect. We're constantly searching for connection. That is just our biological makeup. When we walk into the room, we're scanning for safety and danger. Now, when people get stuck, sometimes they get stuck and they're only scanning for danger. Now, a lot of your neurodivergent population, people, I'm neurodivergent as well, but sometimes we get stuck in danger and that's all that we're seeing. And so it's really good to do some of the exercises that I was sharing with you earlier. And co-regulation actually helps support the autonomic movement. It keeps us healthy. It promotes a flexible nervous system. So communing together, festivals, all that stuff that we do, we didn't realize that we were doing this healing practices. And so it's essential part of our well-being is to connect. And this goes for neurodivergents that aren't really comfortable with connecting with everyone. You don't have to have like this huge community like thing to be like, oh, we're all co-regulating together. You can have little micro connections and micro communities. So the last one, now you don't have to do this if you don't want, but I'm ending with balance that requires movement. So even though we're constantly in this world and Louisiana shifts back and forth from land and water, you know, and our childhood homes. I went back to Grand Isle like 10 years ago, and I hadn't been there since I was 8, and I gasped. I was just like, the land was gone, and it was a lot. And so knowing that, and how do we live in this, and how do we keep going without being stressed, and normalizing our eco anxiety, because it's real, it's here, but it doesn't have to stunt us. And like I said earlier, that balance inherently requires movement. So if you'd like, you don't have to, you can just sit, but I'm gonna go ahead and get up, and then kind of do a tree pose here. So you can put your heel to your ankle, bending the knee. You can put your hands on your hips if you'd like. And then maybe raising your foot up to your calf. And then in the yoga world, we call this the tree. And if you like, bring your arms up and just notice how we're just kind of wiggling, even though I look like I'm still, but I'm wiggling. Well, I didn't look still there. And then you can kind of come down and then do the other foot, and always balance it out. You want to do same movement on the other side, and then raise it up to the calf, and then bringing your arms up. Coming back down. And just that little movement right there, I reset my vagus nerve. So noticing breath, noticing your space, where bringing awareness to your surroundings, noticing the level of emotion, energy. And so when you just notice all those little moments and your senses we're tapping into, you'll be able to start noticing when your nervous system shifts. And then you're able to not stay in those survival states. You can actually just move right through it. And that's what I call the flexible nervous system. So here's some information we have. We have workshops twice a month online on Sundays 4 to 5. All you have to do is go to our website, click on events, and you RSVP. And then we're going to have an upcoming spring series, Climate Emotions and Disaster Mental Health, Preparation and Prevention. And then on the YouTube channel, we're going to be creating climate cafes. I've been doing work with Western North Carolina, and now some organizations from Maui have reached out to me. So stay in tune with us if you'd like to learn some more. And that's it. Ta-da!
Thank you so much for that, Dix. We really appreciate you being with us and sharing your knowledge with us. We have time maybe for one question, but we do ask, if you have questions, please stick around. because once we finish the formal part of our presentation, we'll be able to stick around and have a conversation with Dick. So does anybody have any questions right now? We'll take one question. Anyone? If not, I have some. But I figured I would capitalize your time at the end, and not here. But Gary saves the day once again. Because I got all my little sticky notes with my questions that I'll keep. So Gary, what's your question?
Thanks, Dix. That was awesome. One thing that I appreciated in your slides was that you're showing swamp and marsh, Louisiana swamp and marsh. And you know, in the political situation these days, oftentimes people say, yeah, we're gonna drain the swamp. Like that's a good thing.
I
And I
know
always want to say, man, the swamp is good.
it
Yeah.
is. It makes me
Yeah.
feel calm. You know, of course, I did live up. I'm from New Orleans, but we when I was 7, we moved to right outside Donaldsonville and between Pierre Park. So the swamp was my friend. I can't believe I used to swim in Bayou Lafourche with the alligator.
Gary, we need to come up with a plan to address the draining of the swamp thing, because that aggravates me as well. And the whole idea of draining a swamp and then building a neighborhood in it, or building shopping centers in the drained swamp, like that's just catastrophic. And we've seen that. And so I agree with you 100%. Draining the swamp is not the right answer. And I am with you to create a campaign against that. We'll talk later. So one thing that we would like to ask you now, Dix, is we always ask our presenters, what's your hope for the coast? And could you share that with us?
My hope for the coast is that all of us come together, and really support each other. Basically, like just really community and unity. I don't know if that seems kumbaya, but I kind of do. I want all of us to come together and and like just protect each other, from the Vietnamese to the Croatians to the, all of us. I don't know. Like South Louisiana always has my heart.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that.
Mm.
So a little bit of housekeeping as we wrap things up. If you haven't read or signed on to our position statement, we would encourage you to take a look at that, and you can find that at louisianafolklore.org. We also have some information on our working groups and when they meet. We've got culture and coastal planning, artists and tradition bearers, Louisiana French language, protecting collections, and preparing receiving communities. We have a new convener there. Madeline has joined us. So thank you, Madeline, for helping us out with that working group. So we had talked a little bit before in our last gathering about things that you as a group would like to see for us to put together for you all in 2025. And sort of the theme that we're looking at is moving forward with intention in 2025. And so Maida had mentioned this. We've already got the tools. Now we just need to use them with intention. Our monthly meetings have shown us that collectively we have vibrant ideas and useful tools for this work. And in 2025, we will gather information about these tools we have and hopefully create a toolkit for Louisiana communities. And so we're still working on that idea and what that toolkit looks like. Maybe it comes in the form of a video or documentation, or we're still figuring it out, and we hope that you'll be with us to help us figure that out. And so we'll kick off next year with a whirlwind tour of projects and possibilities, with the leadership team briefly talking about our efforts to move forward with intention. So that's sort of how we're going to kick off that January gathering. So we hope that you'll join us Friday, January 24th, in the new year at 12 o'clock. Would also like to share a little bit information about the Community Fellows Project. Shauna, would you like to talk a bit about this?
We are so excited that we're able to announce another round of people who've been who've been asked to be and have agreed to be community fellows. And this is, y'all remember at the beginning of the meeting when we show you all those funders? We not only get funded for producing these gatherings, we also get funded to run some additional projects. And one of them is the Community Fellows Project. And we have funding just a little bit to help a few people participate. And these people who've been chosen have come from a wide range of backgrounds and expertise. And here's what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to be careful ears and to listen to what we're doing and then talk to us about it at the end in the spring. So they're going to be listening and paying attention and hopefully participating. It's Tara Fitch, who is the archivist with United Home and Nation, Gwen Leno, who is a community activist and been very active in the beautification projects in Vermilion Parish. Gwen is actually on this call. Jennifer Morrison. Jennifer has actually got a video and wave Jennifer. There, Jennifer is with Xavier University, and she has she's a folklorist, and she's been documenting culture in and around all the way from Lafayette through New Orleans for years now, particularly Mardi Gras culture. Well, hopefully one day we'll get to talk more about your work, Jennifer. Gwen Richard, who is just agreed to come on. She's with Acadiana for the Arts. And Aranda Smith, who is an entrepreneur from Houma, Louisiana. And we'll be adding another voice from Terrebonne Parish. So we're delighted to have these people with us. And I'm sure any of them will be happy. If any of y'all have comments that you don't feel comfortable talking to us about, you can talk to one of them, and they'll be in the working groups and showing up at gatherings. So thank you all for your work doing this, and we appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. All right. Also, we'd like to invite Rachel to talk a little bit about something I'm very excited about, and that's seeing Pud dressed up as Santa Claus. Rachel?
Yes, at the Center for Louisiana Studies, we're having an open house on the 19th, which is in Lafayette. So we are a department of the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. We're a research center. We have an archive, and the University Press is also a division of the Center for Louisiana Studies. So our offices are in the Roy House. It's a Victorian home in Lafayette. It's technically on the campus. It's technically the oldest building on the campus. But yeah, it's like the last full day of the semester. So we're having an open house. And you can come and buy very discounted books, scholarly books on Louisiana studies. We publish, of course, all of the books that UL Press publishes are on the topic of Louisiana, but there's fiction, there's history, there's sociology, there's French language, there are children's books. But yeah, we're having like treats, and you can just come and we'll talk to you all about whatever you want in Louisiana studies if you come visit.
Thank you so much for that. Anybody else have any announcements before we wrap things up? Anything? You can raise your hand virtually. All right. So that concludes the formal portion of our presentation today.